Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I am super humbled that you've made the time to join us and hear our story and how a very unlikely partnership led to a pretty innovative project that we believe will soon be, serving tens of thousands of newcomers across the country. My name is Lee, and today I'll be one of three facilitators, speakers, moderators, whatever you want to call us, and I'll be moderating the discussion as well as a Q&A shortly after. So that'll bring us to our agenda really quickly here. We're going to do some introductions for context, just so everyone kind of understands what we're talking about today. And then we're going to have a discussion between me and Steph and Ujir, kind of some questions I'm going to be prompting them with, just to have some open-ended discussion, and hopefully that'll unearth some insights for you all that are joining us. And then we're going to get into a Q&A session, and we're hoping that you guys have lots of questions for us about private-public partnership and how our project worked together and what worked and what didn't, and all those sorts of things. We don't have a whole lot to say. We're just really focusing on having a conversation. So feel free during the discussion to start queuing up your questions in the chat, and then I'll ask folks to unmute their mic and speak and ask their question if they like, or we can read it as well. So yeah, we'll get started here. So disclaimer before we start. I don't want this presentation to come under the guise of experience or expertise in public or private partnerships. Really, this is, I'm coming to you with some humility that, the serendipity that led to our project had a pretty unlikely success. A lot of projects don't work out, and especially partnerships are hard. But we got lucky. We were really blessed to have really good people involved in the project and all with the right intentions and aligned incentives. And I think this partnership has taught us and our collaborators a lot, not just about this partnership, but hopefully partnerships in the future and how we can all approach them better. And yeah, we'd like to share some of those ingredients for success with you today. But by no means are we, or am I, the pros. So just wanted to be clear about that first. Before we start, I'm not a lip coordinator like probably many of the people that are joining us today. So I want to just do a quick introduction of myself. And that way you understand my story and how that story, whether it's my newcomer story or my entrepreneurial story, plays a role in this partnership that we've put together in this really cool project that's come to life. So I was born in Canada, but my parents did flee the war in Sri Lanka. So my mother, seen here in this photo, is with my siblings and I, and she was relocated to Sarnia from the GTA. It was because she was a survivor of domestic violence. They gave her a few options, and she picked the furthest one away. Had she picked the other two options, I might have been in Waterloo or I might have been in St. Thomas, but she picked on the map furthest place away. She had no idea what Sarnia was. But, this really unsuspecting, white conservative industrial community really welcomed our family. And, she was raising three kids under four, no job, no family, for thousands of miles, and certainly no money. So, our experience is really a credit to the wonderful work that so many people do helping newcomers. And we're helping newcomers. This would have been like 25 years ago when I was 4 years old. So my story is only possible, obviously, because of these awesome folks. And I also, in my childhood, watched my mother demonstrate some of the most amazing, welcoming behavior to newcomers that I've ever witnessed. And she's truly a saint and very selfless character. And this is what I've aimed to model my entire life. But that'll be a story for another day, I'm sure, because that's not what we're talking about today. In my career, I started my first business when I was 17. It later became Tomorrow Inc., which is our region's sort of leading creative and communications and technology firm. We work with mission-driven organizations, including nonprofits and the public sector, private sector businesses working in energy and things like that. We really talk about our mission is about helping others build a better tomorrow. And you can learn more if you're curious at bettertomorrow.com. That's my day job. That's what I do, Monday to Thursday when I'm not working on this. So feel free to check that out if you're curious. In my early 20s, I first got the label social entrepreneur, not by, intention, but because I saw a problem that I wanted to solve. And that was around co-working space in our community. I was in my early 20s. And I saw a lot of businesses that were struggling to get like a catapult place to start their business, and freelancers, remote workers getting isolated. So this is where I kind of first, had this idea that many different individuals may not be able to make something feasible in isolation, but together, that with that shared economy, they can make a project that was otherwise not feasible. And that's kind of where that foundational learning came to me, and I've kind of applied it to all the projects I've worked on ever since then. Today, the alt space is 24,000 square feet. It's the only and largest co-working space in our area. It wasn't the only for a while, but it's the one that's still standing. And it's had absolutely astronomical occupancy rates, far above the average in our private offices throughout. So we've been really blessed with getting a lot of good support and having a great community there at the alt space. Now, today, we're going to be focusing on a project that started really, the reason it's here today is because of these two different immigration partnerships and their coordinators and the roles that they played. In today's kind of roundtable, I want to discuss with you guys how our private sector organization complemented these two organizations throughout the engagement. And specifically, we're going to cover the different incentives of organizations and how understanding those incentives fosters the right transparency for collaboration. We're going to talk about the winning ingredients that kind of shape this project into what it is today. We're going to talk about some stories, some insights from our experience. And rather than just telling you about the project, I actually think it'd be more fun and engaging to just let my moderators give you sort of a chronological take from their perspective on the different stages of it. And so hopefully by the end of that, you will have an idea in your head how this started with a simple idea that Stephanie brought to me and turned into what is now a social enterprise that's backed by venture capital and is looking to grow across the country. So I'll let them share their part of the journey. And then at the end, I'll close some loops because I don't even know what they're going to say, just to make sure everyone has the right context. And then we can have a conversation. So I'll pass it over to Stephanie, and I'll let you unmute your mic there and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, the conception of this project and how your role and your motivation for kind of that first conversation and the challenges you were experiencing, et cetera. So yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay, thanks. So really, I'll speak a little bit about my community first to set the scene for you. Lambton is a largely rural community with services for newcomers centralized in Sarnia proper, which is the largest city within, we're a two-tiered system. The 11 municipalities, Sarnia is the largest of it, which means that the other 10 municipalities on Lambton are left to either travel into Sarnia for service or remain isolated. So as well, not all newcomers to the community know how to reach out or indeed are eligible for settlement services. So, oh shoot, I lost my place already. I should have numbered my pages. Let's see, sorry about that.
You were just saying that a lot of people didn't know who to reach out to about settlement services.
Right. So, okay, hold on. Sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. I had my pages all set up here.
Don't worry, Stephanie, you got this.
Okay. Yeah, you got
it. Okay, so I'm just going to start. I'll start where it just makes the most sense. Okay, the Sarnia Lambton LIP, like all LIPs across Canada, like you, offers a variety of resources for newcomers aimed at facilitating their integration and settlement with the ultimate goal of creating a more welcoming community. In order to do that, we need to help newcomers feel connected and remove barriers to services and supports. There are so many newcomers now accessing settlement services, and more non-settlement organizations are not properly referring their clients due to a general lack of connection to them. The easy and most logical answer to these issues was to develop tech to serve as a navigator and connector for immigrants, refugees, migrant workers, and indeed international students, of which our community celebrates. We have a college here that brings in thousands of newcomers each year. So it's a population we want to pay attention to. So for years, the concept stayed just that, a notion or a dream. Then COVID hit, and I know I can virtually feel all of you shuddering. It certainly increased the need for remote services, but financially, it offered a window of opportunity. So after requesting support from IRCC, literally begging, we were granted permission to reroute COVID-related slippage to develop a prototype for this tech. The next step was to think of who would be best suited to create this orientation tool for newcomers. That answer was clear from the start. Tomorrow Inc. has leaned in on several projects that we have commissioned and have demonstrated their commitment to increasing the number of true success stories amid the newcomer population in Lambton, rising well beyond what we paid them to do. That's a little pitch from my team member there. Let's see. So first we pitched the idea and asked them to consider overseeing a process through which we as a community could determine whether the tool should be a website or an app, and the app was born. And you're going to hear a lot more about this later. After much consultation in the community with local leaders and newcomers themselves, Tomorrow Inc., with their amazing design team, shout out to Storm and your team. He wasn't there at the time, but he doesn't really matter. He built the shoot, created a prototype for review. Now, I'm skipping over a lot of much of this process, but I feel like that's going to be fleshed out a little bit later on in the presentation. But suffice to say that the experience of this journey was meaningful and fruitful, to say the least. So just really quickly, I wanted to speak to how the app demonstrates a forward-thinking approach to newcomer support, leveraging technology to create a more inclusive and welcoming environment. It connects newcomers directly with newcomer programs and settlement services, and serves as a tool for service providers, sponsors, and community supporters. It is available in 8 languages, making it accessible to diverse newcomer populations in Lambton. We were able to identify the top 8 most spoken languages in the community, and Tomorrow Inc. was able to incorporate them in the app's functionality. So it's super specific to us. Ultimately, it helps address the challenge that 1/3 of Canadians struggle with, to feel a sense of belonging with their local communities. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about how partners' feedback had helped to in the design. Consultations with both newcomers and community leaders were held in the early stages of design, as well in populating content. Led by Tomorrow Inc., we created elements and features on the app based on the life of a newcomer in areas of priority, from landing to integration, even considering the needs of newcomers before they even come to Canada. Users are asked to build a profile to ensure that only the areas of need or interest to them are prioritized, with the ability to flex or change them when needed. For those not wishing to create a profile at all, some of the features are still available. On the back end, as they call it, we're able to collect data for specific needs and interests of local newcomers. For instance, demographic data like age range, place of origin, preferred language, gender, where they reside within Lambton County, and much more. This helps us to support the planning and implementation of programming that is responsive to the needs of our newcomers. Because it's an app, it's very easily accessed at the level of skill needed to use it is minimal. So I can use it too, which is fantastic. I'm not a techie. I would argue that consultations are ongoing as the world changes, emerging issues arise, and services become available or change. The app it very much relies on community collaboration to exist, up to and including how newcomers and service providers learn about the tool. So promotion is very, very important. So a little bit about the future. We continue to work with Tomorrow Inc. to move the app beyond Lambton's borders. As you will hear, other cities have created their own version of the app, which allows for the expansion of features and creates an environment for innovation, which also increases partners to collaborate with, my notes, outside the region. It allows communities to remain responsive to the needs of their newcomers and service providers by subsidizing care and addressing isolation through tech.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sorry about that, guys.
That was great.
Didn't want to miss anything.
And you did actually miss a couple of things, and it's mostly probably because you're being too humble. I want to say, like, my expertise has been in bringing this product forward and making it something that's delightful for newcomers to use. And that's where the private sector and some of our capabilities come in, as far as like building the product efficiently and doing it through our kind of the different modalities that we use as far as technology and project management, et cetera. But when Stephanie first reached out to me, she had a very strong vision from the beginning. I remember answering the call and she's like, Lee, we need an app. And it sounded kind of audacious, but it was really grounded in a lot of things. It was grounded in, we need a central place for everything. We need a place to refer out to all of our partners that are inside of our LIP Council. We need a way to capture the data in a way that is secure and safe, but informs us on how we're going to manage and allocate funds and prioritize different areas. And we need it to be accessible, especially during the pandemic, because I heard someone say this at this conference. They said, newcomers don't have the luxury of time. And it's so true. And sometimes they need answers quickly. They need to be pointed in the right direction. And an app was a great answer to that. I told her, apps don't make financial sense. How are we going to manage it? Who's going to update it? Blah, 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 blah. And she was really steadfast. I think the app's the right call. So me and her both said, how about this? We'll go through the proper discovery process. We'll do the right. I facilitate these workshops. I do them all the time. And I'm like, at the end, the truth will come through. What is the real best option for the needs that we have? I didn't know everything that I know today about how newcomers operate and the different challenges they have and all the wonderful organizations that are involved in settlement services. And at the end of the day, Stephanie was right. I gave her the email. I said, "You're right. An app's the right choice." And then we went through that process together. So just want to give Stephanie her flowers because really she was kind of that original visionary that came to us with this idea, and she's a very passionate lib coordinator. And I see her work all the time, and she's like just like so fiery in pushing her ideas and initiatives forward. So thank you, Stephanie, for giving your take. And I know people maybe are wondering, like, what is this app? What does it look like? How does it work? We're gonna get to that. I just thought it'd be more fun to leave you in the dark. I don't know. Just it's the way I like to operate. I'll hand it over now to you, Jir, who is going to tell a separate part of the story and really speak to her kind of role being an early adopter and really being the primary reason that we've now raised capital, built out a product, and also bring it to so many other communities. Stephanie was very instrumental in it being a thing in Sarnia Lambton in our community, helping our newcomers. But it was really going to be impossible to bring this across Canada unless some people had the confidence and the conviction to put their hand up and say, we'll be the next to participate. And that's how that shared economy sort of system works. We can really only make this feasible at scale the more people that we can help. So Ujir, please share your part of the story, your experience in the partnership, and some of those things that motivated you to get on board and build a Welcome to Kingston app.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lee. That was great. And it's good to know that I can just call you up and say, hey, I need an app. And it just happens. And Stephanie, that was a great story. Thank you so much for sharing it. It is lovely to join you. My name is Ujir, and I'm from the Kingston Local Immigration Partnership. We call ourselves KIP because we think that's a cuter name. And there's a lot of things we do just because it's cute. But anyways, it's a privilege to join you and my fellow panelists in discussing how collaborative efforts, especially those between the private and public sector, can create meaningful and lasting impact for the newcomers we serve. Just like for many of you, when you begin any initiative, our story here in Kingston, Ontario, began with our journey when we heard and centered the lived experiences of newcomers. In my role, I facilitate a working group where we regularly convene some of our community partners, including our municipality, economic developments, employment agencies, settlement agencies, and post-secondary institutions to talk about how we can build a more supportive and responsive community for international students. In Kingston, Ontario, just to give you a bit of the context, we have 3 larger post-secondary institutions, and we're not a very, very big city necessarily, but we do have more than 6,000 international students, even with the recent caps. And what we do know is that a disproportionately higher number of international students within Kingston transition into permanent residency. So they are choosing to stay in Kingston and have found pathways to stay in Kingston. And this is disproportionately higher compared to the rest of Canada. And we do know that many of our local employers rely on the talents, skills, and contributions of international students. It's also been included within our municipality's strategic plan to support the retention of current and former international students, with some gentle advocacy from our end and some great intentions from our municipal staff. I remember it was almost 2 years ago during one of our first meetings when we started pulling together this group, where an international student stood up in the middle of the room, pulled down the sleeves of her shirt, and showed us burn marks on her arm. She worked in the food industry while she was going to school. And she said to us, I don't even know where the first aid kit is at work. There was a long pause in the meeting, and I think that was a big clarifying moment for the group, where service providers put aside all our organizational mandates, our petty competitions with each other, our discussions about whose responsibility is it really anyway to serve this demographic. And we all started focusing on how can we help? We all recognized that the challenge was access to information and making sure that she knew her rights as an employee, since there were many existing services in the community that could have helped her. But how would she have known these existed? She's new. And we determined, like many, many other challenges, there was already solutions in the community, and there's no point reinventing the wheel. And I remember reading an article that a community partner had shared with me about an innovative solution that occurred in Lambton County that worked on providing tailored information to newcomers within the community in an accessible manner. and address some of the common barriers that we know newcomers experience when trying to access correct and timely information, I would say. Language challenges is often a big one for a lot of newcomers. We do know, let's say, for international students, they have pretty strong language skills. However, it is always a bit more easier to access information in your most comfortable language, and that's not necessarily English or French. And so this tool that we'll talk about a bit more later shared information in someone's most comfortable language, which was so important to us, through a translation feature that can be tailored to the needs of your community. For example, in Kingston, Ontario, it was a big surprise to me when I started working in the sector. We have a huge Portuguese population, and there's a big, long historical reason why that exists. And we talked about earlier, Stephanie hinted that it was a phone app, which addressed some of the digital literacy barriers of having it on a phone instead of a computer and having it as an app instead of a website. I spent a lot of time in my past history doing direct settlement services, supporting GARs, PSRs, and claimants. And what we have noticed is that most newcomers, especially those with barriers, have prioritized having a phone. It is a way to connect with family and friends overseas and maintain that connection. I also spent a good amount of time developing a newcomer seniors program for older adults. And what we have noticed is that while they might have challenges using a computer, a lot of them were very eager to learn how to use a phone. It was a way to connect with their family. And of course, having a place to access centralized information that can be updated regularly. I also hate to say it, but on my end, the implementation of the Welcome app was, I would say, minimal risk on our end, because we were the second adopters of the platform, and we had leaders in other communities that paved the way for us. And I kind of love being second place. That's the best. So we had reached out first to Stephanie to hear about her experiences with this initiative and her relationship working with Lee and his team. And it was comforting to know that the challenges that I was experiencing in my community were shared in her community. She connected us with Lee, who was transparent and responsive, and he has continued to be such, including his team. When implementing this, we had a lot of interest from our community partners, and it was really easy to engage with them because they were actually there in the same room with us when we found out about the need together. So it became an initiative that we started working on together. And it addressed some of our shared challenges or the challenges that a lot of them had experienced, like presenting information that can be tailored to newcomers in a way that is specific to newcomer needs. For example, we can share what walk-in clinics in Kingston accept what forms of health insurance. And you're not going to find that information online, but we knew that information just down in our heads. But how would a newcomer get access to that? But also sharing information on more delicate subjects that a newcomer might not feel comfortable reaching out for, or might not feel safe reaching out for. Like, how do they report intimate partner or domestic violence? Or how do they book a sexual health appointment? It also allowed for more community partners, especially those that were not directly embedded within the settlement sector, to work with newcomers and share information on a larger scale, like what events they're holding, or even for school boards to share information on when school buses were running or not running, or if it was a snow day. And we'll talk about some of the challenges, but overall, it has been a very fun way of engaging with our local community and with community partners across Canada. And I'm so glad we took this journey together.
Awesome. Thank you, Ujir. One thing I'll add too is that, like she said, it's easy to be second, or it's much better to be second. But really, both roles were so critical, not just in the fact that it's paved the way to create the Welcome platform, which we'll talk about, but because with each new community, we get new insights. And it's crazy because I've talked to dozens of LIPs across the country now, and they all share a lot of the same priorities, the same challenges, the same objectives. So you don't actually have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is pretty good. But with each new conversation we have, we learn a little bit more about the fringe cases. And a lot of the time, the fringe cases is kind of where you can help that one family find that path to prosperity and find that, that obstacle they can overcome. A couple examples of this is that once we started working with Ujir in Kingston, that's when some other ideas around improved web accessibility beyond what's already on the iPhone came up. And Ujir made some requests, and our team worked on things like taking text and turning it to speech, things like font size changes. And that was because, again, the conversations that we had. The other interesting conversation we had because of her work inside of a health center, because her lip is hosted in a health center, we started learning about some of the healthcare needs of newcomers, like the fact that they can end up in an emergency room and not have the ability to speak to a doctor and provide their healthcare information. So this idea of a healthcare passport came up, and their colleague organization has applied for a grant to fund the development of a new module that will be part of the Welcome platform. And if that goes through, it'll be this awesome experience where newcomers can go in the app in their own language, explain their history, the medications, the symptoms, the illnesses, whatever, and then they can hand that to a physician in Emerge or whoever else and immediately get the care they need, and then the physician can update it. It's a great idea. It's a great idea. We wouldn't have found out because, her unique lip is kind of housed in that organization, exposed to those things. But that's sort of the beauty of this constant collaboration. And even that's an example of sort of cross-sector people coming in from the healthcare space and providing us those ideas. So really wanted to emphasize that. So now, what are we talking about? So what you heard Stephanie's perspective on how we began the journey, and Ujir's account of how her community embraced the technology. But I'd like to share with you kind of where we are today. Now, 2 years after Welcome to Lambton was launched and a year after Welcome to Kingston is launched. And basically, their involvement is what gave us the confidence to take some significant risk and turn a project into a new company. And it's called the Welcome platform. And we're also backed by London Social Enterprise Fund, Verge Capital. And I'm going to take a quick little few moments here to explain sort of that story and process. So as Stephanie did mention, so I won't chime too much onto this, we brought together over 30 stakeholders for that original discovery process. It took several months, surveys. We collected data, we did design thinking, journey mapping, we crafted personas. We had meetings, some with even some of you. We actually had a meeting with Stephanie coordinated with the Southwestern Ontario LIPS. And we presented the idea before there was funding to develop it, just the prototypes and the design and the process, just to get people's feedback. And I had actually like 3 or 4 calls right after that meeting, and more people provided insight prior to our development. So it was a very well-informed process. And what we've done is we've created now a platform for building, managing, and launching Welcome apps, because this is what makes what would normally be a multiple 6-figure capital investment and a lot of time and a lot of risk and a lot of human resources. It turns into a plug-and-play system that allows you to launch apps in days if you wanted to. Of course, there's content that needs to get curated and partners you have to bring on board, but the technology is no longer the main hurdle. The main hurdle is getting some of the funding, getting some of the partners, and it's a lot more realistic for a lot more communities. So the SaaS platform offers some key features, like its modular design. Every community is different. We learned that. Not everyone wants a job board feature because they've got a partner that has a job board. Not everybody wants a bulletin because they don't want to have to manage the bulletin. So we created a platform that allows you to kind of pick and choose the features that you want to have, and they're all accessible to the homepage. It's got a robust content management system that Stephanie mentioned earlier. We actually built a whole backend, so you don't need to call an agency or contact us to make changes. The app is completely managed by a content management software, like many of the software tools that you probably use at work today. And I know Stephanie mentioned that it's in 8 languages in Sarnia Lambton, and we can enable languages unique to every community, but we support over 130 languages pretty robustly today. And this is throughout the entire app. A lot of people don't realize why there are other apps popping up and they're only French and English. It's because mobile apps present a lot of challenges when it comes to translation. So our team had to build sort of a proprietary system of doing over-the-air translation. So if somebody posts a bulletin board on a Tuesday, it doesn't require an update. It's available in every language to every type of user, real time. And that's one of the funny quirks that you wouldn't think of, but those are some of the unique challenges that we have here building a system designed specifically for newcomers. Welcome App 2.0 is the work that we've done after the pilots. So Stephanie and Ujir helped us with the first pilots of the app. If you go to the App Store today, you'll be able to download those pilot projects. And what we've done is, since working with them, is gather feedback, redesign, re-engineer the entire thing from scratch. And this is the platform that is modular and allows anyone to get on board. We've built it with AI at the center of it. Again, it's modular, so it's optional if anyone's concerned about it. But we really think AI is the future. It understands every user individually, their family composition, if they have kids, if they're looking for work, and it helps prioritize how it refers service to all the amazing agencies in the area. It's trained on provincial, federal, and local data. So it's probably I would say, I mean, pretty boldly that it's probably the best AI for newcomers in your community. Once it's set up, it would be a lot better than ChatGPT because the way that we fine-tuned the AI model around immigration, around referring specifically to agencies, and around prompting things that we've realized that newcomers don't know they don't know. Sometimes the countries they're coming from don't actually have the services that they would come over here to look for. So Welcome AI is trained on answering questions and prompting. Are you having mental health challenges? You are. Well, we have social services, and being a newcomer is isolating and stressful, and there's things that can help you. And for some folks, that might be something that's totally novel, and they wouldn't know about it till many months after it was needed. So that's Welcome AI. We use the app to promote things that you've already probably developed. A lot of communities have pre and post arrival checklists, and they're PDFs, and they're on a website. We've made checklists part of like a really robust to-do app. So newcomers download the app before they get here. They've got a pre-arrival list and a post-arrival list, and they're editable. They can remove things that they think are redundant, add their own things. But the cool part is, it's not just saying, hey, do these 10 things before you get here. Each to-do can expand into a rich text page, videos, photos, instructions, whatever you want. And it helps walk them through the things that they have to do. So it's no longer, here are things you have to do, best of luck to you. It's helping them kind of go through those steps. And again, it's also translated in all those languages that I mentioned. And it's not just about helping them in the utility. It's also about making them excited. When we look at the research around newcomers and the experience, a lot of them are anxious and stressed. It's actually a very high percentage. It's the majority. And moving can be stressful, but moving can also be exciting. It can be inspiring. It can be something that you look forward to. And we want to include that in the app. So the app's not just about getting things done and paperwork. It's about connecting with your neighbors, connecting with the businesses in your community. It's about going around to all the cool spots in your community. We recently did a pitch for PEI, and we had kind of mocked up like all the lighthouses. Because if you're landing in PEI, you may not know that they're famous for their lighthouses, but it could be a fun thing to stamp through the passport and visit the top 10 lighthouses in the area and check them off as you go. So we've got cool itineraries in there. And those itineraries could be around local history and heritage to kind of civically engage the newcomers. It could also be just around cool restaurants. And those restaurants maybe are the ones that are offering deals instead of our deals page. So it's twofold. It's about supporting them and engaging them. And then, of course, the very center of it all, it's about centralization of resources, making it accessible to everybody, whether it's navigating through search or navigating through natural language, through AI. It's about built-in accessibility features, 130 languages, being context aware, being aware of the newcomer's situation, what country they're from, if they have kids, etc. And it's all around referring them to as many of the agencies that exist in that community as possible. That's really at the forefront of why this app exists and what it hopes to achieve. So hopefully that gives you guys enough context. I didn't want to do like a whole product breakdown, so I didn't cover all the features because really it was more about the partnership that I think we wanted to talk about today. But that'll give you, at least in your heads, sort of an idea of what we built and how we built it and how all these partners, whether it was Steph or Ujir or our team at the Welcome platform, have now built this thing that started with just like this inspiration that one day in Stephanie's office and has now made the floor way lower for so many people to get on board with some really cool technology to help newcomers. So anyway, I think it's really inspiring. I'm sure some of you guys may find some inspiration from that too. So we're going to jump into the moderated discussion. And we're going to start by asking some questions to Ujir and Steph. And I've got some questions just to sort of, hopefully extract some insights for everybody that's joining us today. And then we'll try to explore those themes of collaboration across sectors, understanding organizational incentives, and then sort of the role of risk-taking and all of those things. So while we're doing that, if anyone has questions, feel free to put them into the chat. And you can, if you have questions for Ujir and Steph, if you have questions for me or any of us, really doesn't matter. Just feel free to add that in. And then once we have a good queue of questions, we'll transition from the panel and we'll move over to doing some questions here in the chat. Okay. So let me just grab my iPad here. And we'll start with the first question. And awesome. I'm already seeing some questions there in the chat. So we're going to get to them. Please feel free to send them in there in the chat, and we'll be happy to get into those. So my first question, I guess, for Ujir and Steph would be, what are some of the normal like alarm bells that ring in maybe organizations like yours when engaging in a partnership with the private sector? Because obviously we're not a nonprofit and we're not a government organization. So I'm curious, did either of you have any pushback? Was there any red tape that you had to navigate, or even some of maybe in your own minds and hearts, any nervousness around partnership with the private sector? I've heard from a lot of people that for organizations that are in your sector, it can sometimes be unnerving. So whoever wants to jump in on that first, please go ahead.
Go ahead. Yep. You sure?
No, I was pointing towards you. Go for it.
Oh, you're pointing towards me. Okay. Well, at the very inception of it, I would say I work for what our LIP is embedded in the municipalities. We work for the Corporation of the County of Lambton, which has a lot of benefits. There are some protocols and procedures that we have to be mindful of, especially in this area, because when we're, especially when we're applying funds in such large quantities to one organization, we have to share the love, essentially, right? So we always have to put out a call and make sure that other organizations are able to respond. So what happened was, once we found Tomorrow Inc., and we already knew that we were able to work with them easily. They were very community minded and things like that. I really pushed to stay with them because they were slowly forming the context. They knew what we wanted. They knew what our challenges were. They knew how to help. So at the end of the day, advocating to stay with them just took us to a different direction. So rather, again, putting out these different calls to different organizations, then to respond, we created a granting system. So the dollars were able to flow to them, and sort of navigating around, but fairly. They'd been vetted and things like that. So moving forward, by the time we had actually hit the ground running, after the prototype was developed, the county was leaning in on the work that they were doing. So that was one of the challenges initially. It was just sort of working within the confines of policy. But again, they're also very helpful. So that is not a slight at all. I think that's probably our biggest challenge. Eugene, do you have anything to add maybe?
Yeah, I love that. As a non-municipal LIP, we actually didn't have to go through that process. We had the luxury of saying, oh, look, another community did it. And rather than starting from scratch, let's use a product that's already in development. Yeah. But I think to me, what made this partnership so successful or so comfortable is that it really is rooted in that responsiveness and a foundation of shared values between us. So responsiveness is pretty important to me because I'm sure, like everybody else on the call, we're all really, really busy people. So I don't have time to wait for or to be challenged in other ways. I want to work with partners that come together really easily and they listen effectively, adapt swiftly, and move on things quite quickly. And of course, the foundation of shared values is so important to me because that's really very much a purpose of a LIP, right? So talking about what are the values within our community and what can we move forward towards.
Awesome. Thanks. And I guess that brings me, based on kind of what Ujir was saying, maybe my follow-up question would be, what sort of traits do you look for in organizations that are in the private sector? Because obviously there's just such a broad range of different types of organizations. Is there anything that you looked for previous to working with us, and anything that maybe the audience can learn from as far as like positive signals that you try to kind of use as sort of green flags, so to speak, when finding partners that are obviously private sector and profit driven?
So from our end, we did do a review, of course, prior to engaging in this partnership. But I also want to talk about why we sustained this partnership and what really has continued this relationship. So earlier I talked about that responsiveness, but also we receive regular updates from your team with transparent timelines, challenges that they're experiencing, and we can share whatever feedback we need. So that just makes it really easy. And that's why we continue.
Awesome. Stephanie, do you have anything to add to that as far
Um,
as
yeah, I would argue, I don't know the capabilities of private sector organizations to offer in-kind or dollar for dollar contributions. But the one thing I mentioned, like, and this is again sort of tooting your horn, but I would say that if you're looking at or working with an organization who's willing to stand at the front with you and to offer some of their services, either pro bono or just seeing your vision, and really relating it to a point where they're leaning in for on behalf of the community, and that's something that for sure Tomorrow Inc. and other organizations in Lambton, frankly, have done. They've said, we agree. We see your vision, we hear you, let's do this together. So when you spoke a little bit earlier about risk management, Lee, it was, I think for you too, I mean, there were some challenges in moving forward and developing certain features on the app that were very costly. So we ruled some of that out. And so once we started to work together and get things completed in terms of the prototype, you reached out into your network, your community, to see if you could get any help. And I like that too. Like, you leaned in all the way. So that's what you're looking for, whether it's Lee or someone else. At the end of the day, that's what you're looking for, is somebody who has the same sort of community mindedness.
Thanks, Stephanie. It's a good point actually about compromise, because I actually forgot to mention that earlier.
Oh,
In
yeah.
partnerships, there's going to be compromises, and there was a lot of features at the beginning that wouldn't all made sense, and obviously the funding didn't actually end up coming through for our first pilot in full. So our company ended up doing a significant amount of pro bono work. And that was part of the rationale. Because, like, the thing I told Stephanie when we built the first app, I never planned on building in a second one. It was like, I'm going to build the first one. And I told Stephanie, I said, you may not be able to source funding right now for this thing that doesn't exist as part of an annual thing. So I want to build it. I've spent a year now talking to all these people. Now I know we need it. So, as a community member, not even as a business person, but as a community member, I feel like it would be a disservice to not finish the job. So we ended up committing to, paying for it forever. So, all of the costs that would it ever incur, and my company was on the hook for it. And I guess some of that compromise looks like when it came time, and I was like, hey, Stephanie, I want to try to see if we can turn it into a business. It was about sustainability. So Steph understood some of the compromises would be her app's going to be moved over to a platform. It's going to be a shared platform, which means she's not going to have as much autonomy, but it does also mean it'll get continuously developed every single week by a full-time team of developers, and it will be better for everybody. So, a lot of people, again, get skittish when it's a private sector. I love business. For me, it's what pulled my family out of poverty. I was a teen dad, 17 years old, and business for me was like a way to just create the answer I needed. And it was like a way of solving problems and creating value. So we actually think that because we use the private sector here, we were able to raise money from investors. We're able to make the product more sustainable and better. And so all around, it's going to be good. But obviously, compromises are a huge part of partnerships, and it's important that we understand what the lines are for compromise and that everyone's winning. That's like the most important thing. Is a compromise isn't because we want to lean in one person's favor over the other. It compromises about making sure that everyone's in a good position. That's the only reason we ever have to make them, right? Is because if we don't, someone's typically being put out. I have some more questions, but I actually see a lot of questions in the chat. So I don't know, Stephanie and Ujir, if you feel like going a little bit off script here. I don't want to leave any questions unanswered. So I'd rather just jump into it now, so no one's kind of left with a burning question when we leave. Let me see. So this question is we'll start with Ujir and Steph. For Stephanie and Ujir, did you apply for grants to support this initiative? This is from Christine from North. I can't see the rest of it. But yes, from Christine. Did you have to apply for any grants to support the initiative?
Maybe I should start just because we were the ones who sort of began the process. So, like I mentioned earlier, that there was significant slippage in the years of, like, right around COVID time. So I reached out to our project officer, who then had to reach out to his team and higher up to make sure that the funding that we were asking, like, to move around, wasn't necessarily deemed as a direct service, given the position of our lib. So once that was determined that no, in fact, it's such a new concept and that the greater good, would be served here, they agreed to let us move forward with it. The money was moved over, and so the pilot was created, or the prototype was created. Thereafter, the following year, when we had to move forward, and Lee alluded to the fact that we fell a little short, we were hoping to gain more because we did in fact have an application into a couple of organizations who wanted to help and then weren't able to. But we did reach out to IRCC again. And I think you'll all be familiar that once your agreements are put into place, there's usually some money left in the coffers. And so if something good comes up, if you can actually reach out to your officer through your officer and see if there's anything that can be drawn from those coffers. So we did in fact ask, and we were offered a lump sum of money to then contribute to finalizing the project. And so that was directed from IRCC. And so thereafter, we stopped looking because Lee took it over. So,
Yeah.
so essentially that's what happened. So IRCC was very generous, but I think they saw potential in the project. So it wasn't a hard sell.
Yes, and I did tell Stephanie she was off the hook, so she's not paying for anything anymore. That's what you get for being first. And then I don't know, Eugene, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, definitely. So being this, as I said, the second adopter is really, really nice because Stephanie and her team had to look for ways of covering the initial larger cost to start. But building out the second version is not as expensive. So we did explore different ways of maintaining the cost of the app, including maybe possibly using private sponsorships or cost sharing among settlement agencies, because what they've seen on their end is that they see more newcomers, or newcomers are loving that they have an app that they can access information on. Or, of course, using slippage, which is absolutely my most hated word. It's almost as bad as moist. And I don't know why I'm even saying this. Anyways, sorry about that to everyone in the room.
It's true.
I know
so
it's a terrible, terrible word. But using slippage, of course, and or including it as one of our core programming during our CFP process. What some of you might have remembered from IRCC's CFP application process, and I know it's top of mind for so many on the call, is that IRCC did put in a paragraph in there where they're not looking to fund. Thank you. Thanks, Christine. I appreciate that. But IRCC was not looking to fund the creation of new technologies like a new app, but they would fund potentially something that is already created. So they don't want us to reinvent the wheel necessarily. They want us to use the wheel.
Awesome. Thank you, Eugene, for that. And I guess to answer the question preemptively, because we can, if anyone's thinking about it, again, you can have a follow-up conversation with us as well. The way that we are structuring our funding is different for every community, depending on sometimes the size, if they want to merge multiple communities. And then we also have two different options. We have a build costing structure, because sometimes you get capital grants, like a seed grant, and you don't want to pay a subscription for 5 years. You want to pay it up front, but that's not how the grant works. So we are flexible to kind of suit the way that funding works. So there's a build structure where you just pay up front and you have a small maintenance fee, or you can prorate the subscription. And we're also working pretty diligently. And if anyone has connections they want to connect me with, please do. We're trying to bring in some big partners that have a good incentive to support newcomers and have them do cost sharing for the app, so that, for example, maybe Bell Mobility as a telco company has a newcomer phone plan, and they want to be able to promote that on the app, or an insurance provider has a insurance plan. The thing is, and this is again why partnership is so interesting, because me being in the private sector, I can go and get money from these people that have corporate interests, and whether it's their corporate social responsibility or it's their marketing and their acquisition costs, and I can use that to offset the costs for these NPOs, LIPs, etc. So that's one of our goals. And the idea is that eventually what we'll do is we'll have a system where the advertising will be split, and it will cover costs to the subscription as well. So yeah, feel free if anyone's curious to find out more, we can chat about that. I'll go to the next question. So how many, and I'll try to run kind of quickly through this, because there's we got from Araf a great list, but it's 6 questions just in his alone, and I don't want to leave anybody out. So I'm going to try to move through these. How many communities, provinces, territories in the app active right now? So we have active Kingston and Lambton. We just finished actually the platform 2.0 very recently. And in fact, Stephanie and UG are not even on it yet. So we started last November. We kept adding new features, which is why we just ended up saying we'll just wait to deploy it. And then all the conversations that we have right now are with people that have the Welcome app funding as part of their call for proposals. We'll find out maybe January, February, and then a few other people have it in their funding agreements. Maybe they did it through ECDev, and ECDev has put it in their budget, and it just needs to get approved in January or February. So we're hoping that probably about a dozen or so will come online before summer. And we're also launching Welcome to Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal over the next the first 6 months of 2025. So there will be a handful of other apps that you'll be able to see. And kind of the specific thing is that they really are all around that community. They're not meant to be Canada-wide apps or even province-wide apps in most cases. They're meant to be community-centric. So the information is highly relevant to their experiences and the agencies they work with. Next question from May, from Gray Bruce. How do you ensure content such as information about services are up to date? So centralization is key because it's centralized, you don't have to worry about managing everything. And I think someone else is asking a question about if the content's on a website or printed. So maybe I'll just do a 2-in-1 and basically say all the content in the app on Welcome Platform 2.0, it's dynamically linked to a custom website as well. So you'll have a welcomeapp.kingston, for example. On that website, people can download the app. They can submit business deals. They can submit bulletin suggestions. And they can also access all the resources. So you don't even need to have the app on your phone. You can do that there. And one of the ways that we try to keep it up to date, this is always going to be a challenge. Keeping it all in one place is one benefit. But the other thing is users are going to have the opportunity to report when something didn't work. So we have this feedback loop from our users that something may be out of date or incorrect. And then we'll have a notification system that flags the backend and says, hey, this page, a user reported it not working, maybe investigate it. So again, these are some of the advantages over doing it on a website where some of those functionalities wouldn't be present. But keeping it up to date, I'm not going to say that it's magical AI that goes and keeps everything up to date, because it just doesn't. There's turnover, emails change, phone numbers change, and that will always be a challenge. How many app users do we have up to date? I don't know the individual numbers off the top of my head. I probably should, but I think combined between Apple and Android, we're in the thousands. Maybe Ujir and Stephanie, if you're nodding your head, it looks like we're on the same page. I think between Kingston and Lambton, they're both around, if you actually combine both Android and Apple, a couple thousand, which is pretty good because those are small communities actually. So we're pretty happy about that. And the users that are using it are opening the app at least 5 times, which is actually pretty awesome as well. And that's on the old pilot. All the new features that we've added are all around getting that number from 5 to 10 to 15, because we want to create that repeat usage through the deals and the AI and the push notifications and the polling and all those things. Let's see. All right, I'm going to tackle Araf's questions now here. Okay, here we go. Where does the data in the app come from? List of services, programs, how are they being updated? So our team on launch actually helps do a lot of the work. So we actually aggregate a bunch of stuff for you. Welcome Platform is not just software, it's also the marketing. We offer the marketing for the app. We get you Google ads, et cetera, et cetera. And we also provide human services in like curating all the content. But it does come from your team and your stakeholders. And the way that it's managed is in that back-end dashboard. So you can go to healthcare or go to childcare or whatever, open the page and you can edit it and yourself. And then that's where the kind of the source data is all going to be held. I already answered is there a web version question? So we can go to question 3. Is the translation done by machine or actual interpretation? So great question. AI is at the source of our translation, but there's always, like, for example, a specific community that has a huge Ukrainian or a huge Spanish population or whatever, and they might want a specific language to be even better. So the way our translation works is we have a process that runs in the back end, and it runs translation on the whole app. But then any single translation can be reopened, reviewed, and manually corrected, which is I don't know of anywhere else that works. Typically, you hit translate, it happens on device, and you just get what you get. Maybe you guys have used Google Translate on a website before. If you host the website, you can't really influence how Google translates your work, but with the Welcome app, you can. You can go into any language, just select the language, and then you can specifically change the way that it's translated to any language, and that's answering your question around how we handle and mitigate mistranslations. What is the uptake so far, and what are your promotion strategies? So if you're referring to how we promote it to newcomers, our promotion strategy is partnership, right? Kind of the topic of today is about collaboration. We have a playbook, and it's simply you already have all the marketing channels in your community. You don't have to run ads. You don't have to do extravagant marketing because there's a city website, there's a county website, there are settlement services. There's probably an opportunity for a kiosk when people get off the plane. There's probably a bus station. We want you to use existing municipal properties, partnership properties to put up marketing for your app because we believe you can generate significant amount just through the partnerships that you have. Stephanie, go ahead.
100% agree with that. I'll give you an example of one thing we got really creative with. So for instance, in our municipality, we have 26 libraries slash museums slash whatever. So that's also a great way to reach out to communities that are super rural. And we have a number of people who live out in those areas. So we created a kiosk system. We took advantage of a system that already existed. Libraries have a kiosk system where you can actually take advantage of a situation where, for instance, they'll have an iPad there. And if there's something going on, for instance, I know our Tourism Sarnia Lambton ran a thing where they were launching their app. So you can actually use the app if you don't have a device or if you just want to try it. And there's a poster above it to advertise it. There are people on staff to help guide you through and tech assistance if needed. So we took advantage of that for 4 months and it dramatically increased our users. So that's just one way, sort of a holistic way of going about it. The cost therein was just the cost of the posters, which was nominal. It was not very high. And as well, you mentioned buses. We went to, again, Sarnia's pretty small, but we took a terminal that was probably the highest in terms of usage and international students as well. We leveraged the college, obviously, but we put up a poster at the end of one of the the covers, and it drove up our numbers by 200 in like 2 weeks. It was crazy. So just getting creative with it. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and you're right, leveraging networks is key.
And that's probably the challenge. Like for a lot of folks, is like, well, how do we get people to download the app? Well, what's funny is when an app is really good, people will use it. We found out that Nova Chemicals, a huge multinational conglomerate that's a big employer in our community, we didn't even tell them. Stephanie didn't tell them. I didn't tell them. We just found out that they tell their visitors to download the app because it's useful. So being useful is important. Getting good feedback from newcomers is important. And then taking advantage of all of the channels that exist is going to make it so that any community, whether you're 50,000 or 200,000 or 400,000, you'll be able to meet those newcomers when they arrive. Another question is an account required to access the info? And I guess, again, on Welcome 2.0, once we move these apps there, you will be able to see a website for every app that gets generated, and it's dynamically connected, so there's no duplicate work. All the information's accessible for people that are using it on the browser and that don't have the app. And do you find that the first step to download the app and create an account is the main barrier? Probably, yeah, because the rest of the app is free. I think somebody else asked, is the app a no cost to users? It's no cost to users. So newcomers aren't paying for the app. It's free for them to use. We have to find other ways to fund it, but we're certainly not charging them for any of the features ever. Ujir, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I think they're asking about if creating an account is a barrier in itself. And that was actually an area of concern for our team at the beginning. So what we did is that we used a QR code to track how many people scanned the QR code to download the app, and then looked at the number of completed registrations. And we found that the numbers closely aligned. So it hasn't been a huge barrier for a lot of people, for most people. It is a simple registration process as simple as possible.
I didn't know you did that, Ujir.
Yeah, we're pretty sneaky here.
I didn't know that you had. Yeah, it's great data. I should
probably share the data actually.
Yeah, probably bug you for that. But yeah, they need an email. They have to create a password, but just like any app they use on their phone. And again, the data shows newcomers are arriving with phones. It's even if they're refugees, they're typically bringing phones. So for the most part, that hasn't been a barrier for us. We have a one more question. It looks like, are you aware of a foundation? I mean, okay, that sounds like a great. Yeah, I'm not aware, but I would love to look into that further. Because yeah, every community is different. It's one of the challenges of what we're doing. I have literally a full-time employee. Her name's Richa. She's in the call with us that we hired in March because the problem is too big for me to tackle on the side. This is not an easy software company to establish because there's a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of different partners that have to come on and collaborate. And Richa's role is to go to any community, find out the strategic priorities, help with creating joint project agreements, help with creating joint funding agreements. She's basically like if you're thinking this would be great, but I don't have time to like, herd cats and make it a thing. Rich is a resource that we provide to any of our partners so that they can move the project forward without it burdening them. We know that you guys are overworked. We know that you guys have, over the past few years, have had tons and tons of newcomers and not the resources to meet it. So we would certainly never come in with the expectation that we want to add a bunch of work to your plate. So we've got a full team when it comes to marketing the app, when it comes to getting it started and all the content in there. And even with finding the funding, we're not going to leave you on your own trying to figure that out. So obviously you have to be, enthusiastic about what we're doing for it to work. But I think a lot of folks that we've talked to see tremendous value in helping newcomers with this technology. It is going to be 2025 pretty soon. And I think we can all agree that the future this is what the future looks like. It just depends on how soon we get there. So let's see what other questions we have. Okay, awesome. Thank you for your email, Janelle. Storm or Richa, if you could grab that, and we'll follow up. If there are any other questions, we can certainly jump in. I don't know if Stephanie or Jir have anything to add, but
Probably going to think of 7 things as soon as we get off the call.
yeah, that's all right.
But I'd like to add though, if you want to reach out to Ujir or I certainly, I'm throwing you under a bus, sorry, but we'd certainly be happy to answer your questions. It was a wonderful experience, and I wish that everybody had enough money to have one of their own. It is a pretty awesome tool. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys for providing your emails there. And again, we're working towards, speaking tremendously candidly, we're working towards bringing that barrier of entry down. We brought it down over 10x, so an order of magnitude more affordable, more accessible. But it still has a cost, and it's a cost that doesn't exist in a lot of people's budget items. So whether that's roping in other partners that have the money, whether that's finding grants, or whether that's finding corporate partners to advertise, really, we're going to work towards that goal over time. So for the folks that do have the capabilities and the resources, like Stephanie and Ujir, those are the communities that we're looking to work with. We're also, well, I shouldn't say this, it's going to be an announcement later on, but I'm feeling bold. We are working on an initiative right now with a couple very deserving communities that probably wouldn't be able to find the resources that have unique challenges related to newcomers and settlement. And we're going to be helping them out next year. And again, it really is like what I've learned about working in this industry is there really is a lot of like reciprocation and everyone trying to just pulling whatever weight they can to make something come to fruition. So, I think that this is the right kind of a community to be working in where not Stephanie's not like, wait, Ujir got an app and they spent a fraction of what we spent. There's not.
Wait, don't tell her that. Yeah.
Yeah, don't tell her that.
It's fine. It's not my money.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's all of our tax dollars. It's fine.
Exactly. And so, we don't think we're going to offend anybody by bringing our price down over time, because the people that are putting their hand up to get on board and build a welcome app in their community are just typically trying to help push the whole idea forward of this sort of shared economy model. So okay, I got another question here, and we're pretty much wrapping up on time. Process of transitioning the initiative to a social enterprise. So social enterprise, from my understanding, when I was doing my co-working space, it wasn't, and that was years ago now, maybe it's changed, didn't have a legal structure. Like you call yourself a social enterprise, but there wasn't like a framework, because I was looking at doing the co-working space as a nonprofit originally, but then there's like 2 years you have to wait and you can't do donations and social bonds. So I just did it as a business that doesn't make money. We lose money. It's okay, because I think the community needs it. But I was just like, I'd rather just spin out a company and charge people what they can afford to get into the co-working space. And then my other company kind of foots the bill, the big bill for all of the stuff. So, and we were going to pay for that anyway, because we want a studio, a podcast studio, film studio, boardrooms for our own company. So we just share it with people and we don't need it to make money. But this is different. This does need to actually generate a profit. We did raise money from investors, because that we have to find the way to jump kind of the chicken and the egg. So we do have to find scalability and monetize advertising and things like that. But yeah, that's it's a good question about the social enterprise. We'll continue to look into that if there's a framework for it. And then, do you have a breakdown of who is downloading the app by immigrant category? We do. So we do protect the individual data of every individual. Our previous background was building healthcare software. So if there's any concerns about privacy and compliance, you can reach out. We have all the answers to all your questions. But you, as an administrator of your app, you can still monitor the data in the aggregate. You can't see anyone's emails or phone numbers or names, but you can see, what percentage are international students, what percentage are newcomers, what are foreign workers. You can also see what language they all speak. We have all these pie charts. So you get a good breakdown of your population base. So I actually saw some of this data recently. I can't remember. It doesn't look like Jack's on the call, but he actually saw that data. In Sarnia Lambton, there was a good chunk of them that were international students, I remember. But it does provide that level of data. So we want to serve the newcomers with the app. We also want to serve the agencies, and data is super important, whether it's you doing a poll on just some random Friday because you need an answer to a question about if people are interested in a holiday event, or it's because you want to just see the languages as the people that are on your app. Both those sort of data options are there available to you. So,
and I know a lot of LIPs do a lot of newcomer experience surveys for their communities. So this is another place you can distribute it in one's first language.
Yeah, we're trying to make this we're trying to make the value of what we're creating valuable enough so it justifies the cost. So you don't have to hire polling firms anymore. You can just do the poll yourself. And we get you access to $120,000 a year USD in advertising if you want it. Now we're starting that program next year. So, and that's, by the way, that's significantly multiples more than our costs are per year. So we're trying to add enough value in other ways. And I think that polling feature was one of those things that we thought this would normally cost money and we could put it in the app, and everything in one place is just a good way to operate for efficiency, cost efficiency. So yeah, we've got that feature in there as well. So it is 2:11. I think we wrap up at 2:15, right? So I'm going to let everybody go. Thank you guys for staying with us the whole time, hearing the answers to all these questions, hearing about our story of private-public partnership. If anyone wants to reach out to any of us, our emails are there. I've got my QR code right now on screen. If you'd like to scan that, you can book a time with Richa and myself, and we can just have an exploratory conversation. There's no commitments or obligations. It's just like, an introductory conversation so you can learn more. We'd be happy to sit down and chat with any of you. And yeah, I hope you guys are inspired. A couple of years ago, Stephanie, a lot of people might say in her role was in a box, restricted, didn't have really the ability to do anything. And sometimes you can feel powerless. I've talked to a lot of LIPs that feel like they've got ideas. They just get suppressed, or they get rejected, or they don't get the funding. So I'd encourage all of you guys, not just in this app, but in anything that you're doing, to be resilient, look to the private sector for partnerships. Sometimes you never know, it could end up becoming something much bigger than you planned. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.